A white man sees a black woman sitting by the neighborhood pool without a resident pass. Minutes later, he realizes he just disrespected the woman who trains the entire city's police force. The pool at Huntington Hills was almost empty that Saturday morning. A few lawn chairs stood untouched. The water, still and clear, mirrored the overcast sky. Celeste Morgan walked through the gate without looking around. She wore a navy blue swimsuit under a light gray cover-up, holding a book in one hand and her sandals in the other. No phone, no purse, no visible key fob. She reached the far end of the pool deck, laid down her towel, and placed the book carefully beside it. Restorative Leadership in Policing. She didn't glance at the few other people scattered around. Celeste, 44, was the Director of Training and Internal Development at the San Diego Police Department. Most people wouldn't recognize her outside her role. That was how she preferred it. A white couple, mid-50s, sitting across the pool, exchanged a look as she sat down. The woman nudged her husband, nodded in Celeste's direction. Seconds later, they quietly gathered their belongings and left, without a word. Celeste noticed. She always did. But she didn't react. She leaned back, opened her book, and read the same sentence 3 times before closing it again. She wasn't surprised. She was used to silence that screamed. Celeste hadn't been sitting for more than 10 minutes when the presence of someone nearby pulled her out of her book. She looked up slowly. "Excuse me," a man said, his tone polite but pointed. "Are you a guest here?" He was tall, mid-50s, with a practiced smile and the sort of posture that suggested he never questioned his authority. His name was Ron Mathers, new to the neighborhood, but clearly eager to play gatekeeper. "I live here," Celeste replied evenly. Ron's expression didn't change. "Do you have your key fob on you?" Celeste closed her book. "I didn't realize I'd need credentials to sit by my own pool." "It's nothing personal," Ron said, still smiling. "We've had people sneak in. I'm just being cautious." "Of course," she said, not moving. A few chairs away, a woman in sunglasses glanced over, then leaned toward her friend. They both looked at Celeste, then back at Ron. Ron didn't move. "Would you mind showing it? Just so we don't have to involve anyone else." "I'm not carrying electronics in my swimsuit," Celeste replied, "but you're welcome to check with the front desk." Ron nodded like he'd expected that. "No problem," he said, then pulled out his phone. He walked a few paces away, speaking low into the receiver. Celeste caught bits. "Someone at the pool. No visible fob. Wants to confirm." Minutes later, a young security guard appeared. Thin frame, fresh haircut, trying to look neutral. "Hi there," he said to Celeste. "We just got a call about a possible non-resident. Mind if I check your credentials?" "Celeste Morgan," she said. "Unit 12C. Feel free to radio the front desk." The guard hesitated. "Do you have your access fob with you?" Celeste raised an eyebrow. "Not in this." The guard gave a tight smile, pressed the button on his earpiece, and turned slightly away to speak. Ron walked closer again, standing behind the guard now. He lowered his voice just enough that it could still be heard. "People sneak in all the time. We can't just assume everyone belongs." Celeste turned to him. "And who gets to decide who belongs?" Ron stepped back, taken off guard. "Hey, I didn't mean—" "You didn't have to," she said. Just then, the guard nodded. "Confirmed. Ms. Morgan lives here. Apologies for the inconvenience." Celeste nodded. "Thank you." She didn't look at Ron, but the space between them spoke louder than anything. The woman in sunglasses was now holding up her phone, pretending to scroll, but clearly recording. Another man whispered something to his son and stood up to leave. Ron shifted awkwardly, then tried to salvage something. "Look, I was just looking out for the community." Celeste picked up her book again but didn't open it. "I know exactly who you were looking out for." The guard cleared his throat and walked off, clearly eager to escape. Ron stayed frozen for a few more seconds, then turned and left without another word. Celeste remained still. Her book sat closed in her lap, and though no one said anything, everyone was watching. The tension didn't break after Ron left. If anything, it thickened. A few more residents had gathered near the far end of the pool. Some stood with their arms crossed, others whispering behind sunglasses. A teenage girl angled her phone just slightly toward Celeste's chair. No one approached her. No one asked if she was okay. They just watched. Celeste didn't rise. She didn't fidget. She simply looked up and asked Ron, who'd stopped a few feet away, still visibly agitated, without raising her voice. "You ask because you're concerned about the rules, or because of how I look?" Ron spun back around. "I'd ask anyone. This isn't about race." Celeste nodded slowly. "Would you, though? If they were blonde in yoga pants, sipping iced coffee?" He hesitated. "I don't know what that has to do with anything." "You do," she said. "You just don't want to say it." The young security guard had stepped aside to make another call, voice low and tense. His posture now was more uncertain. He kept glancing between Ron and Celeste, as if trying to gauge what direction this was going to take. Celeste didn't shift in her seat, but her gaze didn't leave Ron. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "You wanted to make me prove something that no one else here has had to prove. And even when I gave you an option to verify it, through the front desk, you still brought an audience." Ron's mouth opened, then closed. People were starting to record openly now. One man across the pool lifted his phone above his shoulder like he'd done it before. Celeste reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. Ron took a step back. His eyes flicked to the phone, then back to her. "You're really going to do this?" he asked. She didn't answer him. She tapped her screen. A quiet dial tone rang out. Everyone near enough to hear stopped pretending not to listen. The guard looked at her. "Ma'am, I can handle this." Celeste held up a hand, calm but firm. "You've done what you needed to. This part isn't for you." The guard fell silent. Ron crossed his arms and took another step back. The call connected. Celeste's voice was clear, steady. "Hey, can you transfer me to Deputy Chief Ruiz? Tell him Celeste Morgan's been mistaken for an intruder at her own pool again." Ron blinked. "You work for the police?" he asked, disbelieving. Celeste turned her head toward him for the first time in minutes. "Not exactly," she said. "I train them." She ended the call. A pause hung in the air like weight. That's when the energy in the pool area changed. One woman stood up and left, whispering to her partner. The teenage girl put her phone down. The man with the phone recording slowly lowered his hand. Ron stayed where he was, his arms no longer crossed. Celeste looked at him. "I train officers to identify bias before it turns into a headline. I train them to listen before they escalate. You're lucky I'm off duty." Ron swallowed hard, but didn't reply. He glanced around. It was clear now that he'd lost whatever control he thought he had, not just because of Celeste's role, but because everyone saw him for who he really was. The teenage girl tapped something on her phone. The woman by the towel rack avoided eye contact. The hush was no longer polite. It was charged. Celeste didn't press further. She didn't need to. A second security guard approached from the gate. This one older, bulkier, with a steadier gait. He wore a name badge clipped to his vest and carried himself like he was used to de-escalating what others had already messed up. He looked directly at Ron and asked, "Sir, would you step over here for a moment?" Ron froze. Then, without protest, he followed. The first guard gave Celeste a look, half apology, half admiration, then turned to join his colleague. The recording phones clicked off, almost in sync. Celeste stayed where she was. She closed her eyes, tilted her face up toward the sun, and let herself breathe, not because she was relaxed, but because she'd earned the quiet. The call ended. Celeste set her phone beside her chair and said nothing. No one else did either. The entire space had gone still. Not quiet from confusion, but from realization. They understood now. Ron shifted his feet. Wait, you work with the police? Celeste kept her voice level. I lead the department that trains officers on how not to do what you just did. He didn't answer. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. His eyes moved around the pool deck, scanning for support. There was none. The younger security guard stepped forward, visibly unsettled. Ms. Morgan, I apologize. I didn't know. I should have handled that better. She looked at him. You followed a report, but if your training tells you to treat someone like me differently, maybe the training needs a review. The guard dropped his gaze. You're right. That wasn't okay. Someone near the back spoke up, an older woman in a sun hat. She's the one who ran the equity seminar last year. I remember her. A younger man nearby nodded. She was on the news when the department rolled out new training protocols. Recognition began spreading through the crowd. Ron's shoulders lowered. His words came out slowly. I didn't know. I was just trying to keep the area safe. Celeste didn't flinch. You were trying to make me feel like I didn't belong. And you did it without even thinking twice. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. A new figure approached. Tall, late 40s, wearing a navy jacket with a clipboard in hand. He moved with purpose, scanning the scene as he arrived. Ms. Morgan, he said when he reached her. I'm the HOA property manager. I just heard what happened. I want to say I'm sorry. This never should have happened. Celeste grabbed her towel. She didn't raise her voice. It didn't just happen today. That's what people don't get. It keeps happening. The manager nodded once. He didn't respond. Ron looked like he wanted to say more, but the older security guard stepped beside him. Mr. Mathers, he said evenly, we recommend you head home for now. Ron looked around again. Faces had turned away. Some looked down. Not one met his eyes. He turned and walked out. No protest. No defense. Celeste looked around. Most people avoided her gaze. A few didn't. Their eyes held something different now. Maybe discomfort. Maybe respect. A mother with 2 young children approached slowly. She didn't speak, just nodded once, then sat a few chairs down. Her kids kicked their sandals off. She opened a bottle of sunscreen and started applying it. She didn't glance at Celeste again, but she didn't need to. Celeste took a breath and stood. She folded her towel with care, placed her book on top, then reached for her sunglasses. Her movements were calm, deliberate. Ron hadn't left yet. He was a few feet away, half turned toward the exit but still watching her. Like he wanted to say something but no longer trusted himself to speak. Celeste met his eyes for the last time. You don't need a badge to treat people with dignity, she said. But since you value authority so much, I hope this one was loud enough for you. Ron didn't answer. He nodded once. Maybe it was a sign of understanding. Maybe just surrender. The HOA manager stood nearby but kept his distance. He didn't interrupt. The younger security guard adjusted his earpiece, shifting his weight from foot to foot. The older one stood straight, hands folded calmly in front of him. Celeste picked up her bag. She didn't rush. She gave no parting speech, no warning, just turned and walked toward the gate. As she passed, people who had been holding phones slowly lowered them. No one made eye contact. A few looked at the ground. One woman whispered something to her partner, who didn't reply. The mother with the children gave Celeste a quiet nod. The kids didn't notice anything had happened. That was how it should have been. Celeste walked through the gate without looking back. The sun was higher now. A slight breeze moved the umbrellas by the lounge chairs. Someone coughed. Someone else cleared their throat. Life at the pool returned to normal, but nothing felt the same. The young guard pulled out his earpiece and pocketed it. His posture straightened. He didn't sit. He just stood there. Inside the clubhouse, a few more residents were peeking out the window. They didn't come out. They stayed behind the glass. A man near the fountain set his phone down, rubbed his face, and muttered something under his breath. His wife didn't respond. Ron finally left, quietly, alone. Back at the pool, the mother helped her kids into the shallow end. The girl squealed at the cold water. The boy laughed. Their mother sat back and pulled out her book. No one recorded. No one commented. But there was a shared understanding in the stillness. Someone had crossed a line. Someone else had drawn one. And everyone saw it. Later that afternoon, a short email would go out to all residents. A reminder about community values. A note about equal treatment. A link to the HOA's updated non-discrimination policy. Celeste wouldn't read it. She already knew what it should have said. She got into her car, checked the time, and drove off. At the next red light, she didn't think about what she should have said. She didn't replay the scene. She just sat there, quiet, present. Because for once, she didn't have to carry it home. And that, too, was a kind of justice. This was never just about a pool. It was about who feels welcome, and who's asked to prove they belong. If you've ever been questioned in a place you paid for, lived in, or built yourself, this story is yours. Because dignity shouldn't depend on what you wear, how you look, or what others assume. It's time we stop accepting silence as comfort. Share this story. Start a conversation. And if you believe respect should be unconditional, subscribe. More stories like this deserve to be told, and more people need to hear them.